So, welcome everyone to 3 Steps to Stop Stress Eating. I am so excited to be here with you today. My name is Jessica Procini. I'm an emotional eating healer and the founder of Escape from Emotional Eating. And I am on a mission to help others use food as fuel instead of a way to cope, soothe, or escape from their busy, stressful lives. Now, you might be wondering, this sounds so unique. How did you get into this work? And the truth is that I was an emotional eater. Food was my safety blanket. After a long, stressful day of work, I would come home, walk right into my apartment without even taking my coat off, and go right to the pantry. I would try to get my hands on any type of sugar or dark chocolate as a way to soothe and escape my busy, stressful, overwhelming life. And this happened pretty often. At first, I really didn't think it was that big of a deal. I mean, there's so many people who talk about like overeating and things like that. But over time, it really started to add up, and it really started to feel like what I was doing with food just didn't feel right. I was not happy in my body. I was constantly thinking about food. I always had like food on me everywhere I went to soothe when things got, anxious or overwhelming. It was just always like food for me. And I remember trying to talk to my friends about it, and they sort of like brushed it off, and they were like, oh, everyone does that. That's no big deal. And then they would try to join me in my obsession to then exercise it off. And then I tried to talk to my partner about it at the time, and he just lovingly cocked his head and was like, oh, Jessica, I love you no matter what size you are, which is everything that we want our partners to say. But what really boggled my mind was, how could he love me when all I wanted to do was crawl out of my own skin? And then I tried to seek support in therapists and other professionals, but many of them just wanted to write me a prescription for antidepressants and send me on my way. And I was so clear that I was already using food as a way to numb myself. I didn't want to continue to live this numb life. I didn't want to simply replace food with medication. And it was at that point that I really started to feel like there was something seriously wrong with me. And I really started to feel very misunderstood. At that point, I felt like my only other option was to go to Overeaters Anonymous. Now, I come from a very long history of alcoholism, generations and generations of it. And when it came to going to Overeaters Anonymous, I honestly could never get myself to go to a meeting. It just all felt so triggering. It felt like I was repeating generational patterns from my past. I just couldn't get myself to go. Besides that, I also really felt like a lot of people who attended Overeaters Anonymous really had this perspective that emotional eating was something they were going to be living with for the rest of their lives. And for me, I didn't want that. I didn't want to live with this torture that I felt with food for even one day longer, let alone try to manage it for the rest of my life. So it was at that point that I really felt hopeless, misunderstood, very frustrated, and very confused. I was completely out of options. I had nowhere else to turn. And yet, in the midst of all of that, I really felt that I had this inner knowing that there had to be a better way, that there just had to be a better way for me to approach food. And that's when I decided to dedicate myself to investigating every single nook and cranny of my relationship with food, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and even the spiritual. And what rocked my world was that I found answers. I found answers that no one was talking about. No one was talking about in the health and wellness world. And the first thing that I realized was that I was an emotional eater. I When I first discovered this completely blew my socks off because I wasn't eating 10 bags of potato chips. In my mind, I thought in order to be an emotional eater, you have to weigh hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and you had to like qualify by eating 10 bags of potato chips. And my relationship with food and my compulsions with food weren't showing up in those extremes. So I never considered myself an emotional eater. But when I discovered that I was, everything started to make sense. I was definitely using food to numb, to cope, to soothe, to escape, and even to reward myself. I absolutely 100% was an emotional eater. The second thing that I discovered was that everything that I had tried in the past, the meal plans, portion control, cleanses, therapy, working out twice a day, eating as clean as possible, that all of this was a complete mismatch, that it wasn't addressing my emotional eating. And that's why I could eat healthy, but I could also very much overeat a lot of the healthy foods. The third thing that I discovered was that I had to heal the roots of my relationship with food. And when I did heal the roots of my relationship with food, everything changed to the point where now I am completely free from emotional eating. I have lost over 45 pounds of both physical, mental, and emotional weight, but it's not really about the physical that's important to me. What really blows my mind is about my ability to handle difficulty without running to food to take the edge off. Now, food is a nourishing asset to me. I absolutely still love food. After all, I am Italian, but the way that I love food is very different. I see food as a nourishing asset, as fuel first, and then the pleasure and all of the fun things that come along with food are secondary. I no longer feel compulsive or anxious around it. I don't think about it all the time. When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm full, I stop. It has really become so simplified compared to the way that it was in the past. And it's been over 3.5 years since I emotionally ate. I remember pretty much every day I would eat so much that I would have a bellyache, like eating so much that I felt so uncomfortable in my skin. And now I no longer resonate with that feeling. I sort of don't even remember what it feels like. But I know that things have changed dramatically from my willingness to get to the deep roots of what was going on in my relationship with food. Overall, what I really learned from this journey and continue to learn being a student to this process is that my life is not too big or too much to handle. And in the past, I would use food to manage my big, overwhelming life. And in that process, using food to manage it was literally killing me. But now my life is not too big, too much to handle. If anything, I feel like life has just gotten so much more insane and busier. But now I really understand how to do it differently and how to be at peace amongst the chaos and how to be the source of that peace where I'm no longer leaning on food to give me the peace that I was really yearning for. So all of this is what has brought me to my work today and is what fueled the creation of Escape from Emotional Eating and all the levels of support that I offer, such as my year-long group and private coaching programs, my retreats called The Escape that happen multiple times a year, to workshops that I do like this one, and even to my bi-weekly newsletter that goes out a couple of times a month with inspiring videos and support and tools. So if you would like to stay in touch beyond our little webinar here today, I invite you to, in the chat box of this Zoom meeting, to send me a private message of your email. And send me a private message of your email if you would like to stay in touch beyond our time together here today. And I'll make sure that you're added to my newsletter list and you can receive those tips and videos regularly so that you're continuing to use food as fuel too. Okay, so what exactly is stress eating? Stress eating, that's what we're here to talk about today. So the best way to define what stress eating is to give you a quiz, a self-assessment. And this self-assessment is really created from my own experience and working with my clients for over 8 years. But everyone who takes this quiz always tells me how eye-opening it is. And I sense it'll really support you in getting a clear understanding of what's really going on in your relationship with food. So I invite you to pull out a pen and a piece of paper because I'm going to read a series of statements and I want you to respond with true or false. So I'll read a statement and you will simply write down on your piece of paper, true, if the statement is true for you, or false. Now, if the statement is sort of like a maybe, if you're like, oh yeah, I do that maybe sometimes, or yeah, that happened this one time, you know, a month ago or something. If you're on the fence, I recommend that you mark the statement as true for yourself. Because even if the symptom can be a little infrequent, the root of what's going on is still very much there. Okay, so we're gonna do a quiz. You'll mark down on your sheet of paper, true or false, and then I'll tell you what to do from there. All right, let's dive in. So first one, true or false for you? I overeat even if it's just a couple of bites. So just writing down silently with yourself, true or false, you overeat even if it's just a couple of bites. Number 2, I eat when I'm not physically hungry. I eat when I'm not physically hungry. Number 3, I eat a lot later in the day, especially after 3 p.m. I eat a lot later in the day, especially after 3 p.m. Number 4, I spend a lot of time thinking about food and my body. I spend a lot of time thinking about food and my body. Number 5, I can't seem to lose weight no matter how healthy I eat. I can't seem to lose weight no matter how healthy I eat. Number 6, I feel like I can't trust my body or I'll lose control and eat everything. I feel like I can't trust my body or I'll lose control and eat everything. Number 7, when life gets overwhelming, I have a hard time saying no to food. When life gets overwhelming, I have a hard time saying no to food. Number 8, I've tried diets to stop stress eating, but they don't stick and they're not sustainable for me. I've tried diets to stop stress eating, but they don't stick for me and they're not sustainable. Number 9, I feel bloated, lethargic, and dim. I feel bloated, lethargic, and dim. Number 10, I won't buy certain foods or keep them in my house because I'll overdo it. I won't buy certain foods or keep them in my house because I'll overdo it. And finally, number 11, I'm here because I want real transformation in my relationship with food. I'm here because I want real transformation in my relationship with food. So go back and tally up how many were true for you. So each of these is a symptom of emotional eating. So if you had more than 3 truths, then emotional eating is going on for you. Now, what's the difference between stress eating and emotional eating? So stress eating and emotional eating are the same thing. It's using food for a purpose other than fuel. Stress eating is just a more specific term saying that you eat when you're stressed. But when you are stressed, it is like a tangled up ball of emotions. And emotions are what fuel emotional eating. So stress eating and emotional eating are very much the same thing. The roots of what is going on are the same. And it's not about how much you're eating, and it's not even really about what you're eating. It's really about why you're eating. So it doesn't matter if you're eating unhealthy or healthy, that when it comes to emotional eating or stress eating, we can overeat healthy food too. But it's really about why you are eating. And I highly recommend, if you're taking notes, that you jot that down, that it's about why you are eating. So the definition of emotional eating is using food for a purpose other than fuel. Another writer downer. Emotional eating is using food for a purpose other than fuel. When you're stressed, you eat. When you're anxious, you eat. When you're overwhelmed, you eat. When you're bored, you eat. When you want to reward yourself, you eat. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all the different ways we can use food, but emotional eating is using food for a purpose other than fuel. Now, emotional eating will not go away simply by swapping out cookies for carrot sticks. It is a symptom of a deeper issue. That's why diets, meal plans, portion control, and exercise are really a mismatch for emotional eaters. Because diets, meal plans, portion control, and exercise are really a surface approach. They solely focus on the physical, and they really miss the emotional and the mental components of our relationship with food. And the way I like to talk about it is that you want to think of emotional eating like a weed. And you have 2 ways that you can weed your garden. You can either chop it off at the top, only for those weeds to grow back a few weeks later, or you can pull the weeds out right from the root. Now, chopping the weed off at the top is very much like diets, meal plans, and portion control and exercise when it comes to emotional eating. Pulling it out from the root is everything that I'm about, because like I shared before, living with emotional eating is torture. It sucks. And I truly believe that we were not put here on this planet at this time to be constantly thinking about food. We need to be up and out in the world. We can't be bogged down by what we ate last night. We need food to fuel our passions and our missions in life, especially if you're looking to leave your mark on this world. So in order to do that, we have to pull it out right from the root. Now you might be thinking, but what about therapy? Does therapy work for emotional eaters? And I have to say, from my own experience, I spent over 932 hours on a therapy couch. None of it touched my relationship with food. I would feel good when I was in the office, sitting on the couch, talking about my feelings, venting. But then when I would go home, the compulsion was still there. I was still being drawn to the pantry. I was still feeling compulsive with food. It never really set me free. And I found that therapy can be very general. It can be too general and not specific enough to get to the root of what's going on. Also, a lot of therapists haven't had personal experiences with emotional eating. So a lot of the therapy that is available out there is very clinical. And that's something that I really bring to my work with my clients is I've walked this journey. I know what it's like. I know what's going on in your own mind and your body with food. And that is everything that I bring to my work with my clients. So one of the things that's very common in therapy is they'll say, oh, you need to feel your feelings. Just feel your feelings. Feel your feelings. And for me, when I was experiencing that and people were telling me that I just had to feel my feelings, it honestly felt like if I felt my feelings, they would hit me like a tsunami and I would never make it out alive. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was eating, so I didn't have to feel my feelings. And what I realized is I needed something more. I needed a tangible tool so that I could feel my feelings, but also know there's an exit. There's a way out, that I don't have to get pummeled and overwhelmed by them, but I can actually transform them. And again, that's really what drove me to create this body of work. So all in all, when it comes to emotional eating, we need to approach food differently. We need to approach food differently than the same old eat this, not that. We need to approach food differently so that we can get to the roots of why you're really eating, what you're really hungry for, and give yourself what you truly need. So, we didn't come here today just to talk about emotional eating. We came here to actually really talk about how to change it. So, let's start with that. So the first step that we must take when approaching emotional eating is to actually look at what is going on. And there can be a whole bunch of denial and disassociation and a tremendous amount of shame when it comes to taking an intimate look at our relationship with food. And this is really why I love doing this work in small groups, because every time that I lead a workshop like this, or even my retreats, everyone always tells me how comforting it is to know that they're not alone. So we're going to take that element of not being alone and being here together today to take a look at what is really going on in your relationship with food. So take a moment, and on your sheet of paper, I want you to jot down one time that you can remember you were emotionally eating, right? Perhaps it was the last time that you used food to soothe or cope, reward, or escape, right? Just take a moment here and now and write down one time that you can remember that you were using food in an emotional eating experience. Try to capture as much information about what you were experiencing as possible. Where were you? What were you doing? What did you eat? Who were you with? Did anything happen earlier that day that led you to emotionally eat? Just capturing as much information that you can remember about this experience. So one example that some of you may have written down is that, emotional eating happened last night when you were trying to put your kids to bed. It was a really difficult bedtime. Summer's difficult, putting the kids to bed. They somehow became bewitched. And, after you finally got them into bed, you found yourself rummaging through the pantry for something to eat, even though you weren't physically hungry. So that's an example of actually one of my clients, Larissa. She used to experience her emotional eating at night after she put her kids to bed. It was like the stress of the day was over. This was time for just her, and she would find herself eating many chocolate-covered raisins when she really knew that she shouldn't be. Another example that you may have written down is something like my client Lily, who really experienced a high level of anxiety. And she would use food as a way to ground, to soothe her nervous system, to really try to tamper down her overactive nervous system. Or maybe your experience showed up a little bit differently. No right, no wrong, no judgment. Like I said earlier, emotional eating can show up in so many different ways. But what's important is that you're aware of what was going on, right? That you've opened your eyes. And these are some makeshift travel glasses, opening your eyes to really look at what's going on for you. Okay. So then step 2, once we're aware of what's going on, then we start to move into the feeling, right? And we have to, in order to heal, we have to feel. It is an important part of the process. That is where therapy does have something that is valuable when it comes to emotional eating, is that we do have to feel to heal. We sort of have to go in and also be able to come back out. So taking a look at the experience that you wrote down, I want you to go back and jot down, how did you feel? How did you feel when you were emotionally eating in that experience that you wrote down? And then how did you feel afterwards? Again, just capturing the information for yourself. So feel to heal. We've got to look at the feelings head on and actually feel them in order to transform them. So one of my clients, her name is Dr. Dickerson, Sandy as we call her. So when we started our work together, she said to me, Jessica, I eat when I'm frustrated, and I'm frustrated when I eat. And that was the beginning of our work together. And since then, I recently had a session with her, and I asked her, when was the last time that you had an experience like that? And she was like, I don't even remember. So she no longer eats when she's frustrated, and she no longer is frustrated when she eats. What I love about working with Sandy is that she is a physician. She knows a lot about the physical body. She knows what she should be doing to be healthy. But when we started our work together, she really struggled to keep that consistent. And through our work together, not only is she free from her emotional eating, but in doing so, it freed up so much energy for her. So much energy that she took it and channeled it into creating an organization that helps doctors identify victims of sex trafficking. And I love to tell this story because when it comes to our own health and wellness, it's very common for us as women to feel guilty, to feel ashamed that we're taking time to focus on ourselves. But Sandy is a great example of what is available when we do the real work to heal our emotional eating, free up all of that energy and brain space, and what is possible to be created in our lives and in the world. And I'll have to ask her how many people, she's supported through this organization. But I know that the work of training doctors to identify victims of sex trafficking is so, so, so important. And that's like what she does on the side, not like even mentioning how her work with her patients has transformed and gotten so much easier and fun because she now knows how to manage her emotions and energy and is no longer using food to cope. So a great example of the importance of really identifying the feelings so we can start the healing process. So then from there, once we've looked and we've felt, then we have to move into choosing to change. So step 3 is choosing to change. And this is where we access tools and processes so that the awareness is moving into action. One of the things that I hear so often when it comes to emotional eaters is they're so aware. Like they're like, oh yeah, I know I stress eat all the time, or oh yeah, I know I do that with food. And that's where it ends. So in order to really have true transformation with food, we have to choose to change. And through that process, we have to move the awareness into actual action. So here's how we're going to do that. So one example of the things that I teach in all of my programs and even on my retreats is how to untangle physical hunger from emotional hunger. So believe it or not, there are 2 types of hunger. Physical, like literally your body needs food, and then there's the emotional. But the thing is, for emotional eaters, these are very tangled. And we can feel emotionally hungry, but think that we're actually physically hungry. And one of the telltale signs of this is if you feel hungry all the time. If you feel hungry all the time, especially after you just ate lunch, right? If you just finished a meal, maybe an hour goes by, and then you're sort of like back in the pantry looking for something else, is a great example of emotional hunger in action. So in the work that I do, it's about untangling these 2 types of hungers, really understanding the language that your emotional hunger speaks to you, and also really understanding what am I really hungry for, right? So I know I just ate lunch, so is this physical hunger or is this emotional hunger? And what am I really hungry for? What do I really need here that I'm trying to fill the void with food? So when we untangle these 2 types of hungers, we use the tool called Honoring Hunger and Fullness. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this tool today, but I do want you to know that Hunger and Fullness is a 4-part training that I teach in all of my programs and retreats. It is very in-depth and has a lot of moving parts to it. But for today, I'm going to specifically focus on the fullness aspect of it. And we're going to specifically look at your physical fullness so that you can start to use this even today and take it with you on the road, because I want you to take something tangibly away from our time together today. But just know there's a lot more involved, and I often get a lot of questions about it, but all of that is in the training. Okay, so diving in to how to honor fullness. So you want to imagine a fullness scale. So a scale from 1 to 10. And because we have slides, it's so much easier to visualize this. So the fullness scale is a scale of 1 to 10, a sliding scale. And you want to think of the 10 being that Thanksgiving Day stuffed feeling. This is where you overdid it. This is where you feel bloated, maybe even gassy, lethargic, like you need to unbutton your pants, like all you want to do is go home and take a nap. You don't want anyone to touch you, let alone see you. We all have different experiences of what a 10 on the fullness scale feels like. But the way I like to describe it is that like Thanksgiving Day stuff. You just overdid it. Maybe you ate for 2 or 3 or 4. But it is a sensation within the body. It doesn't have anything to do with the quantity that you ate, but it is a sensation within your body. Now, when it comes to honoring fullness and how we start to stop overeating is by what I call eating for integrity. So the sweet spot of satiation is at a 7 on the fullness scale. This is a sweet spot. It is about eating for integrity. And eating for integrity is really about, really honoring what is true for your physical body. It's not a method of portion control, but it really is about how much you feel that you need in that moment. And I call it the sweet spot of satiation. And this method is really about eating for integrity, because your hunger and fullness levels will fluctuate every single hour. This is why portion control does not work, because if you had an intense, very active day the day before, you are probably going to be more hungry the next day or even in a few hours. So what I love about hunger and fullness is that it really allows you to have the freedom to give yourself what you need in that moment. And I am absolutely a person who loves going out to eat. I do a lot of traveling. And what I love again about honoring fullness is I can go to amazing places, like even Paris, where they have amazing food, and still eat food that I love and is delicious. I'm not eating cardboards and seeds and berries. But we can go and we can travel and we can do the things that we love, but we can still be in integrity with our physical body. We can still honor our physical body and what it needs by honoring fullness. Now, I want to warn you that anything less than a 7 is a method of restriction. If you are eating and you are consciously withholding yourself from feeling satiated, you are setting yourself up for a binge later on. And this happens all the time with dieting, right? Where people are only really able to stick to it for a period of time, and then they gain all the weight back and more. That's because they are restricting themselves. They are in a place of deprivation and starvation, and I do not recommend this. It is not only very detrimental to your physical body, your metabolism, your nervous system, and your brain, but it also puts you in a mood where no one wants to be around you. And if anything, it's where we really think about food all the time again. So you want to think about the fullness scale as these two extremes, and where you want to practice landing is at a 7, at that sweet spot of satiation. So I highly recommend that you jot this down and you take this with you and you really start to practice it. So take a moment and look back at your notes at the experience that you wrote down, the emotional eating experience that you jotted down. And I want you to jot down where you were on the fullness scale when you stopped eating in that experience. So were you at a 10 or an 8 or something else? Maybe an 11 or 12? Again, no right, no wrong, no judgment, just looking. And then when you are eating later today, tonight, tomorrow, even 2 weeks from now, I really invite you to be thinking to yourself, where am I on the fullness scale? You know, if 10 is Thanksgiving Day stuffed, where am I right now? And to really allow yourself to take a breath, to pause, to even energetically step back from any kind of conversation that you're engaged in and really tune in and check in with yourself. You will receive a number. Sometimes I receive multiple numbers because it is a sliding scale, but to really be patient with yourself and to practice. Everything when it comes to emotional eating is a practice. It is not a quick fix. It is not an immediate result. It is a practice and it is a process. But I can tell you that through the process, you will experience such a deeper sense of self-confidence, self-trust, self-safety, because you get to know yourself through this process. And we start with simply honoring fullness and the fullness scale. So we actually tangibly practice this, we being my clients and my escapees, on my retreats called The Escape. Every day we sit down for lunch and dinner together and we practice hunger and fullness. We practice it in this safe, sacred space where all of the distractions of life are taken out and where you can really hear and listen the needs of your own self. I've had people come to my retreats again and again telling me that they feel hungry all the time, they're overeating almost every day, a couple times a week, or even that the clock really dictates when they eat, that they have no idea when they should eat or when they're hungry or when they're full. It's just sort of like, oh, it's 12 o'clock, let me eat lunch. And then I've watched them step out of our retreat experiences knowing so clearly their own hunger and fullness, knowing so clearly what they need to nourish themselves, both on a physical level and an emotional level. I've watched people step into the retreats feeling like they have a very chaotic, anxious, fearful relationship with food, and then step out of it having so much more peace and confidence in their relationship with food. And this is literally from the tangible practice of hunger and fullness and all of the other training and transformation that happens on our amazing retreats down in Cape May multiple times a year. So that is The Escape. And it's really, you know, like I said earlier, that we have to look to learn, right? We have to face it. And we can go to retreats that, you know, talk about food and wellness, but to have the actual physical experience together. I'm sitting right there at the table with you, and we get to eat together, and we get to look at what is coming up for you in the eating process, so that it can be transformed, is truly liberating for all who attend the escapes. So practice, 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 honoring fullness. So as we start to wind down our time together today, I want you to know that everything that we did together is a great first step. And yet there is so much more when it comes to really healing your emotional eating and breaking free from the emotional eating cycle. So I've opened 3 spots in my calendar, and I invite you to apply so that we can connect more deeply about your relationship with food in an escape from emotional eating discovery session. So this is a private connection between me and you, where we'll take a deeper look at your challenges with emotional eating and overeating. We'll get really clear on why this is happening, why this hasn't been healed yet, and we'll put next steps in place so you're breaking the emotional eating cycle. We'll also have the opportunity to explore if any of the programs and retreats that I offer would be a right next step for you. So this is complimentary, my gift to you, to really honor you for being here today, and for really those people who are like, I want to be done with this. Food feels like torture. I do it multiple times a week. I don't want to live this way anymore. It sucks my energy. It sucks, period. I want this to change. If that is you, then I highly recommend and invite you to go right now to escapefromemotionaleatingapplication.com. There's a short questionnaire on that website. It should only take 5 minutes. Your answers come directly to me, and then we can set up a time for us to connect more deeply in your escape from emotional eating discovery session. People tell me all the time how this 1 hour together changes so much in their relationship with food. So you'll want to go right now to escapefromemotionaleatingapplication.com and apply now. There are only 3 spots available because my schedule is super, super squishy and tight, but I opened these 3 spots specifically for you, especially if you want to break free from emotional eating. The other thing that I want to gift as an honoring of our time together today is for the first 3 people who apply, they will receive an additional training from the Hunger and Fullness 4-part series that is all about transforming food fear to food faith. So this is for you if you really struggle with leaving food on your plate, if you tend to get caught up in like the old they're starving people on the planet, like I need to eat this food kind of fear. This is also for you if you have a lot of anxiety around food or feel very uncertain around your own hunger and fullness levels. This training is made for you. It is a part of the 4-part Hunger and Fullness series, and I'm gifting this to you, again, from a place of gratitude and really honoring our time together. So that special bonus training is for the first 3 people who apply for a discovery session. And myself and my team will support you in getting all of this set up after you apply. So again, you'll want to go to escapefromemotionaleatingapplication.com right now to get one of these 3 spots for a discovery session. The first 3 receive an extra bonus training. And I believe my amazing support, Haley, who is a member of our client care team, has entered the hyperlink in the chat box so you can have an easy way of just clicking on there and going right to the site, filling it out, submitting it, and we'll get you scheduled as soon as possible. But other than that, I just really absolutely want to share with you how deeply grateful I am for you attending today and being here with me, and really having the courage to look deeply at your relationship with food. I know how nerve-wracking it can be to actually really face what's going on in your relationship with food. But I also know that you can't unsee what you've already seen. So, absolutely, something awesome will come from our time together today. So, I am just absolutely so grateful to have this time. Thank you for allowing me to share my story and these tools. And if you are struggling with emotional eating, I want you to know that you don't have to live with it, that you don't have to just settle up and say, this is it, and I just got to live with this for the rest of my life. There is a way to escape. I did it. You can too. And it would absolutely be an honor to hold your hand every step of the way. So again, thank you so much for being here with me today. Deep, deep gratitude. Enjoy the rest of your day. Use your tool of honoring fullness tonight and even into the week and weekend. And I'm so looking forward to hearing about how this supported you and continues to transform your relationship with food. All right, guys, have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye.